Imagine the worst day of your life. Maybe it's a car crash on a rainy Tuesday. Maybe it's a heart attack that feels like an elephant sitting on your chest. Maybe it's your child burning up with a fever of 104 at 3 a.m. You rush to the emergency room. You are scared. You are vulnerable. You are a biological hostage. You see a doctor in a white coat. You trust them. You assume they are a pillar of the community hired by the hospital to save you. You assume the sign on the door meant something. You are wrong. In nearly 45% of American emergency rooms as of 2024, the doctor standing over your stretcher does not work for the hospital. They do not work for the city. They work for a private equity firm in a skyscraper in New York City or a hedge fund in Chicago. You think you are a patient. To the algorithm that owns the man in the white coat, you are something else entirely. You are a revenue cycle management opportunity. You are a bag of meat with a credit score. Welcome to the money system. Today we perform an autopsy on the American healthcare system to find out why saving your life has become a highly leveraged business model for destroying your bank account. For decades, medicine was protected by a concept called the corporate practice of medicine doctrine. Laws in over 30 states explicitly said corporations cannot practice medicine. Only doctors can. The logic was simple. A doctor's loyalty must be to the patient, not to a shareholder. Hospitals were nonprofits run by churches, universities, or local governments. The goal was boring but noble. Cover costs, pay the staff, heal the sick. But in the early 2000s, Wall Street lawyers found a loophole, a back door. They realized they couldn't buy the doctors, but they could buy the management companies that hired the doctors. They discovered that healthcare is the perfect business. Why? Because it operates on inelastic demand. If the price of a Gucci bag goes up, you don't buy it. If the price of a Tesla goes up, you buy a Toyota. But if the price of a life-saving appendectomy goes up, you don't shop around, you don't negotiate, you pay whatever they ask, or you die. The sharks smelled blood. Massive private equity firms, Blackstone, KKR, Apollo, Cerberus, began a strategy called the roll-up. They didn't march in with hostile takeovers. They came in with cocktail parties. They wooed tired, independent doctors with promises of efficiency. You just practice medicine, they said. We'll handle the paperwork. We'll handle the billing. Here is a check for $1 million to sell us your practice. It sounded like paradise. It was actually a trap. They combined thousands of small independent groups into massive corporate leviathans like Team Health, Envision Health Care, and U.S. Acute Care Solutions. By 2025, these weren't medical groups. They were logistics giants trading on the stock market. They didn't change the sign on the hospital door. They operated like a parasite, invisible from the outside, but controlling the host from within. Once they took control, the Hippocratic Oath was replaced by the fiduciary duty to shareholders. The logic of the ER changed. It stopped being about medicine, it became about math. And in their equation, you are the variable that needs to be maximized. So, what happens when a hedge fund buys your doctor? The atmosphere changes instantly. The mission statement on the wall remains the same, but the operating system of the hospital is overwritten. The first thing they do is aggressive revenue optimization. For years, their favorite weapon was the surprise bill. This was a financial ambush. Here's how the trap worked. You go to a hospital that is in-network for your insurance. You did your homework. You think you are safe. But the private equity firm deliberately pulled the ER doctors out of the insurance network. So you are in an in-network bed, in an in-network building, being treated by an out-of-network doctor who has never met you. A week later, you get a bill for $4,000 for a bandage and Tylenol. Your insurance refuses to pay. The private equity firm sends debt collectors after your house. While Congress tried to stop this with the No Surprises Act, the war didn't end. The firms just shifted tactics. They moved from brute force to psychological warfare. They weaponized the billing code itself. This is called Upcoding, and in 2025, it is automated by artificial intelligence. When you visit a doctor, your sickness is assigned a number from 1 to 5. Level 1 is a minor scrape. Level 5 is a near-death experience. Private equity firms installed proprietary software on hospital computers that acts like a relentless digital manager. If a doctor tries to code a visit as a level 3, the screen flashes red. It nudges them. Are you sure this isn't a level 4? Did you consider the patient's history of smoking? Did you check for sepsis? They force doctors to document non-existent complications to justify higher bills. A 2024 investigation revealed that after private equity takeovers, the number of high-severity billing codes didn't just rise, it doubled overnight. The patients weren't getting sicker. The billing department just got greedier. They turned the common cold into a complex respiratory event worth $1,200. But the deception goes deeper than just the bill. They started manipulating the concept of waiting times. Hospitals are judged on how fast you see a doctor. Private equity found a way to cheat this metric using a trick called provider in triage. Here's the scene. You walk into a crowded ER. You are in pain. A mid-level provider greets you in the waiting room, asks you 2 questions, maybe orders a blood test, and says, "Take a seat." That interaction lasted 45 seconds, but in the hospital's computer system, the clock stopped. Officially, you have been seen. The door-to-doctor time is recorded as 10 minutes. In reality, you are sent back to the plastic chair for another 6 hours. But the private equity firm can now advertise shortest wait times in the county on billboards, luring in more patients, into an already collapsing system. And why is the system collapsing? Because of the leveraged buyout model. This is the financial cancer at the heart of the industry. When a firm like KKR or Apollo buys a medical group, they don't pay with their own cash. They act like a broke home buyer. They take out a massive loan to buy the company, and then, this is the crucial part, they put that debt on the company's books. Suddenly, a profitable community hospital group owes billions of dollars to a consortium of banks. To pay the interest on that debt, they cannot just be profitable. They must be hyper-efficient. They have to cut costs to the bone. And what is the single most expensive item in an emergency room? The board-certified physician. So, the replacement strategy begins. They systematically fire the experienced doctors, the men and women with 15,000 hours of clinical training who can spot a stroke from across the room. They replace them with mid-level providers, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants. These are hard-working, decent professionals. But they are being thrown into the deep end without a life jacket. A nurse practitioner might have 500 to 1,000 hours of clinical training, often done largely online. To the private equity spreadsheet, a provider is a provider, but one costs $350 an hour and the other costs $85. The result is the skeleton crew model. In many PE-run hospitals, you now have a supervision ratio that is terrifying. One exhausted doctor is technically supervising 15 mid-levels and 60 patients simultaneously. This leads to task saturation. The doctor is just signing charts, not seeing patients. They are rubber-stamping decisions they haven't verified. The consequences are deadly. A landmark study published in late 2024 showed the terrifying result of this math. Patients in private equity-owned hospitals experience a sharp rise in adverse events, falls, infections, and missed diagnoses. The study found that while the cost to the patient went up by 20%, the actual mortality rate, the chance of you dying, increased by nearly 13% in certain cohorts. Think about that. You are paying a premium price for a discount product that is statistically more likely to kill you. They have turned the emergency room into a high-speed assembly line where safety is a bottleneck and empathy is an inefficiency. They extract the cash, they service the debt, and they hope you survive long enough to pay the deductible. It is easy to blame the doctors. You see them rushing, dismissive, typing on computers instead of looking at you. But in this story, the doctors are victims too. Imagine spending 10 years in medical school. You missed your 20s. You took an oath. First, do no harm. And now, you have a 26-year-old manager with an MBA breathing down your neck telling you your throughput metrics are low. They tell you to order more CT scans because the machine needs to pay for itself. They tell you to discharge grandma before she's ready because there's a wait list. This is called moral injury. It is different from burnout. Burnout is when you are tired. Moral injury is the psychological trauma of being forced to betray your own conscience. It is a violation of the soul. It is why emergency medicine physicians now have one of the highest suicide rates of any profession in America. They didn't sign up to be debt collectors for Apollo or KKR. They signed up to heal, and if they speak up, they get fired. The private equity contract almost always has a strict non-compete clause. If you complain about patient safety, you don't just lose your job. You are legally banned from working in any hospital within 50 miles. They own your license. And then comes the final stage of the private equity life cycle, the looting. We need to look at the catastrophic collapse of Steward Health Care in 2024 to understand the endgame. Steward was the largest private physician-owned network in the U.S. It was bought by private equity. What did the investors do? They executed a maneuver called a sale-leaseback. They sold the actual hospital buildings, the land and the bricks to a real estate trust for billions of dollars. They took that cash and paid themselves massive dividends. They bought yachts. They bought mansions. But now, the hospital didn't own its own building. It had to pay millions of dollars a month in rent to the new owners. When the money ran out, the horror started. In Florida, a Steward hospital was so broke they couldn't afford pest control. The ER was infested with 3,000 bats. In Massachusetts, a new mother died of internal bleeding because the embolization equipment, a standard device, had been repossessed by the vendor due to unpaid bills. The investors didn't care. They had already made their profit from the real estate sale. When Steward filed for bankruptcy in May 2024, leaving 30 hospitals on the brink of closure and thousands of staff without jobs, the private equity executives walked away rich. This is the reality. They treat American healthcare like a strip mine. They buy the company, they load it with debt, they sell the real estate, they extract every dollar of value from the dying patients and the weeping staff, and when the carcass finally collapses like Envision Healthcare did in 2023, like Steward did in 2024, they leave the mess for the taxpayers to clean up. The next time you walk into a hospital, look at the name on the billing statement. Look at the eyes of the doctor. Because in modern America, death isn't just a tragedy. It is a line item on a balance sheet. It is a liquidity event. And for the men in the high-rise towers, business is good.